Ever felt stuck on your path to navigating the healthcare industry and creating the ultimate solution that you know is the one that can impact millions? Entrepreneurs, listen up. Your journey to navigate the healthcare innovation maze just got a lot more cleaner. In today's episode, we interview an industry leader, Adam Turinas, as he explores the 6 golden nuggets on how do you create a true roadmap to success. We begin with the Triad of Successful Foundation. Stay tuned. Healthcare entrepreneurs, are you ready to rewrite the rules for your business so you can have more time off, a great team, and more income while creating a positive social impact? Then you are in the right place. Welcome to The Provider's Edge. I'm your host, Sabrina Rumbach. I'm a provider, an international peak performance keynote speaker, and a best-selling author. Let's open the gateway to profitability for you today. My guests and I help healthcare entrepreneurs and startup founders like you break through barriers so you can control your business, control your life, and control your future. This is your defining moment to be a disruptor in healthcare. Welcome back to another episode. This is Sabrina Rumbach, your host for Provider's Edge. And today we have another exciting guest with us, and we're talking about all things marketing related to grow your healthcare startup. And Adam is a long-time technology marketing leader and entrepreneur. And he spent 2 decades marketing for Dell, IBM, Bank of America, and dozens of other major marketers. In 2012, he founded and grown and eventually sold a healthcare technology software business and then created Health Launchpad, a leading health tech marketing firm that is teaching clients how to use A and B. And he's also an author of the best-selling book, Total Customer Growth. So can't wait to have this conversation with you, Adam.
Thank you for having me on. Such a pleasure.
Yes, we got connected actually through a mutual referral, and also someone who I really loved leveraging LinkedIn to really grow your audience and making the right connections. So it was just serendipity of how everything lines up. I think in life, sometimes that is the way, is sometimes the right talent and right skill has to be in your corner when the right synchronicity and energy is there. But we also needed to be proactive making those reach. So I'm grateful that you're here with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us a bit more about your journey. I know you work with some of the major brands and companies. How did it all formulate to healthcare and then also so niched into growing from the marketing side?
Right. So let me start with, how I became a health tech entrepreneur, which is an accident, frankly. So I'd spent about 20 something years in the marketing space, working for major global advertising and digital agencies. And then I took a break from that. And I was doing some consulting, advising companies on how to improve their internal communications. And a friend of mine, who's a physician, I don't have a medical background. So I really have no medical training at all. Bizarrely, I do have a degree in physiology, but I've never used it. So a friend of mine who's a physician, he's a sailing buddy. I've started 6 businesses, and half of those businesses were actually started through sailing friends, bizarrely. And so this sailing friend of mine, who's a physician, was really intrigued by what we were doing to help these companies improve the communications with their vendors, or how the vendors improve their communications with their clients. And he said, I really think there's a need for it in healthcare. There's a big problem that healthcare systems have, particularly in terms of the relationship and the communications that they have with their medical staff at large, particularly independent practices. And so we started talking to some healthcare organizations about this. And when we went to our first meeting, we walked into this hospital in New Jersey, and I realized, I hadn't actually been in a hospital in 20 years. And that was for the birth of my son. And so for me, it was, having no background in healthcare, it was like entering a parallel universe. I didn't know, the language was unfamiliar to me. The business was unfamiliar to me. The whole way that these organizations operate, the economic model of healthcare, completely alien. And it took me a long time to understand it. But thanks to my friend, and who then became a business partner, the physician, I learned from him. And it was actually quite a good relationship. It was sort of, I think a lot of organizations in healthcare have this notion of a dyad. And so the dyad was, he's a very accomplished physician, had a very successful physician practice, medical practice. And it also actually had taken a detour himself and become a healthcare lawyer. And so really understood the inner workings of healthcare. So I learned from him every day. I mean, it took me about a year to feel confident in it. But thanks to him, I really began to understood it. Equally, he didn't really have much experience in running a business. I mean, a medical practice is a business, but running a startup, a tech startup, which is what it became. And I'll explain that in a minute. And didn't have any experience in marketing and sales. And he was like a sponge. It was, I was very lucky in that, my partner, I'd explain certain things to him, how sales processes work, how to use LinkedIn. He would just get right on it. And, I was honestly, I think he became like one of the best salespeople I've ever worked with, almost too good. Sometimes it was sort of like he would oversell what we were doing, but really effective. And, very fortunate that relationship, underpinned the business. So we were doing some consulting. We were working with several hospitals in the Northeast. And then about 6 months into the consulting, we were coming back together from a conference, and we were driving in the same car and chatting. And we said, I sort of feel like I wish there was an app for what we were doing, which is improving communications. And we started brainstorming what this app would look like. It would have a module that would do, messaging. It would have a module that would be communications from the management. It would maybe have their call schedules, all sorts of different ideas that we felt that this app could do. And we thought, this is kind of interesting. Maybe we should pitch it. And so we came up with we got a designer to mock up what the application would look like. And we went to see one of our clients, a guy by the name of Joe Scott, who was then the CEO of Jersey City Medical Center. And eventually he became the Chief Transformation Officer of RWJ Barnabas. And Joe heard our pitch. And at the end of it, he said, "You build that, I'll buy it." And so it was like, okay, that lit the fuse, basically. So we went and hired some developers and developed an MVP, a minimum viable product, which was based on secure messaging, secure texting. And so we then tested that with his the medical staff in his emergency room, and they loved it. In fact, at the end of the pilot, we said, "Look, we've actually got to shut the pilot down, because we're going to relaunch the application with making some modifications." We couldn't take it off them. They said that we don't want to give this up. So we launched the business. And the business initially was known as Practice Unite. And the staff at the healthcare system were actually very helpful. The leadership was very helpful in advising us in how to position and how to market it to them. And over the next year, we sold it into about half a dozen other healthcare systems in the Northeast. When we started, we decided we would only focus on selling to organizations we felt we could drive to and service personally, because we felt it was just so important that with our first customers that, we had a 100% satisfaction rating. And that was successful. And then We took on a reseller. The CEO of the reseller became a big fan of ours, and he then became our first investor. And he then brought in a small syndicate of other investors, which gave us sort of an initial angel round of investment. And so that sort of got us further. Over the first 2 or 3 years, we started to really scale up the company. We had a chief technology officer, who happened to be another sailing buddy, actually. Brilliant technologist, just a fantastic developer, but also just a really good strategic technologist. It's a perfect CTO for us. And we brought on a head of product development, a customer success person, and half a dozen developers. And so things were really starting to grow. We got some very positive public relations. We were developing a good sort of social media presence. Traffic was building to the website. And things were really going well. The problem was that we were running out of cash. And I could see a cliff where we were going to it was an existential crisis. Actually, a friend of mine who's a serial entrepreneur said, he said in his experience, the secret of success in startups is you limp from one near-death experience to another until you're eventually successful. And it certainly felt like that. And so we'd been talking to investors, to venture capitalists. And the problem was that the market that we were in exploded. And so when we started, there were probably about 5 to 10 other companies doing what we were doing, which we already thought was there were too many people out there doing it. The problem was the barrier to entry to developing these communications applications was pretty low. And so within about 2 years, there were over 100 companies doing what we were doing. And so the VCs essentially said, look, we've already placed bets, a company called Tiger Connect, which raised a lot of money. And some other companies beat us basically to the VCs. And we just couldn't get the VCs to bite. And it was getting pretty desperate. And then what happened was that we worked quite closely with some of the market analysts like Gartner and Class. And our lead analyst from Gartner actually said, I know another company that sort of competes with you, but is sort of complementary. And I think they'd be a good fit. And so he introduced us and we put the two companies together. And so that's when we changed from being Practice Unite to becoming Unify Health. And that transaction enabled us to raise a lot more money. So we did a proper seed round. I mean, it ended up being about $4 million. I took over as the CEO of the company, and when we took on their staff and combined we thought we were going to combine the applications, and in the end, we just ended up sort of rebuilding it. We continued to add customers, but to be frank, most of our growth over the next couple of years actually came from existing customers, because the existing customers we had, for the Practice Unite customers that we sold and ones we sold after the merger, we never lost a single customer. And we had, very high level of satisfaction. I think it was like a 7.5 on a net promoter score. And so each customer would add users. So, for example, we sold it into the clinically integrated network of Catholic health systems of Long Island. And the CIO said, I want to expand it system wide. So that expanded us across 6 hospitals. And they would also add features and functions. So there was, the thing that was unique about it was the ability to customize it and to add features and to integrate it. So we were very successful actually in growing it. We struggled though with adding new customers in the last couple of years, because the market had that sort of taken a step change in terms of what the expectations were. in terms of features and functions. And the other thing that was happening was market consolidation. So a lot of the guys, the 100 people just disappeared. They went out of business. And then many of them actually then got acquired or put together, particularly by private equity or some of the incumbents in the market like Vocera or PerfectServe. And we got to a point where it was pretty clear that, if we were to be successful, we were going to go out and need to do a big raise, like about $20 million. And it was quite clear that we were not going to be successful in doing that. And so the board essentially decided it was time to sell. And so we went through a process. We hired an investment banker, which was a fascinating process. It's stressful, but fascinating. And we did anonymous solicitations of potential buyers to, I think a list was about 80 potential companies. We got interest from about 15, received bids from, I think, 4 of them. And in the end, accepted to be acquired by a company called Harris Healthcare, which is quite a large. For example, they recently bought the EHR components of Allscripts, and they're an acquisition machine. And so that ended the journey. And I spent about 6 months doing a transition, and then I took a break.
As you so deserve to.
Yeah, I do. I needed it too. I was feeling, I've started 6 businesses. I've also worked in some pretty high-powered organizations, some of them very difficult companies, some of them quite political. And I would say that without a shadow of a doubt, that those 7 years of launching a startup, going through the transitions that we went through, bootstrapping it, self-funding it, right? So, we were paying checks, we were paying for our staff out of our savings. I sold my house and, we moved into a small rental house so that we just cut our costs back. I'd say that the first 3 or 4 years were the most exciting time I've ever had in my career. And I would say the last 3 years were the toughest I've ever had in my career. It was really difficult.
I think those are a really good point for people to pick up, is that sometimes when we get into these new ventures, it's the excitement. And then we're willing to put in that extra work, the extra help just to get going.
Yep.
But once things hit really tough time, especially I even wanted to summarize from that story, there's so many learning points for everybody who's listening to what you guys did. You started by simply validating that idea, have someone who truly believe in you guys. So now it is impactful, right? Because when we think about truly how I believe a top of any business is a triad. You have the innovators, right? Great idea out there, but sometimes it's too out there. You don't even know if it's impactful or not. So you need someone who's in that top executive triad to say, hey, this actually can be something people willing to buy, people can create results. And then you need a third leg to say, how do I actually make things happen, right? Into the detailed process. So when you have those triad that work so synchronistically together, and you guys found that person, you guys found the person who say, actually, I'll buy it. I see what you guys doing. And then you move to that process and making a pilot, a minimal viable product, and you keep going. And then also with that transition of able to build something, another key thing you guys did is leveraging that high-level business partnership. Who do you know? Who do you already have that human connection and trust? And for that person to help you expand the network and helping for other people to open up also their wallet to help you guys in this amazing, exciting journey. And once you guys start noticing things are wobbly because everybody else start coming up with the similar things, it's not just get discouraged, but reshifting. How do you then create better strategy? Go back to market research, right? Which sometimes people forget to do. And even people that I talk with, these founders, I will be like, did you not know I can probably name at least 3 other competitors, or they perhaps are not your competitor, but because they're doing similar thing, you should at least know what they're talking about to make yourself more unique, right? So this amazing journey that you guys going on. I think that's what people need to realize is we constantly have to make the shift, but go back to your human connection, go back to that partnership. And then once it becomes something more noticeable, then you took on that really great PR, right? Then amplify everything and then start snowballing.
Yes, I think, one of the most important lessons that I got out of this is that particularly in healthcare is so huge. Healthcare is over $4 trillion in the US, which is, bigger than the GDP of most countries. And I think that particularly for somebody like myself who was coming from outside of healthcare, or my partner who was a physician who was coming from outside of business, is understanding the importance of picking a niche. And I think within healthcare, pick your niche and then pick your niche within the niche. So our niche was clinical communications, and our niche within the niche was we were the only ones that would actually customize the application and white label it so that our customers, they were promoting their application, not our application, to their medical staff. And what vindicated it for us was that when we talked to some of our competitors at a trade show, they said the last thing that they would ever do was customize. So I was like, okay, if that's the last thing you're going to do, it's the first thing we're going to do. We know it's hard. If we can figure out how to do that, we create a moat. And that actually became our unique positioning in the market. And it's that thing of zigging where you zag. We tried lots of other things. We developed a solution for home care. We just couldn't get enough traction with it. The market wasn't ready for it. We developed a patient application. And again, we were too early with that one. And so there's a lot of research that shows that the biggest factor in terms of the success of a startup is market timing. And the problem was we were a little late for our clinical communication space. We could have caught up if we'd raised more money, but we didn't. And we were a little early when we tried to sort of try some alternative solutions. So it was a very important lesson. And I basically carried that lesson forward into what I'm now doing. So I think I mentioned to you, right? So I've started a new business. It's actually now 3.5 years ago, so it's not that new, called Health Launchpad. And what Health Launchpad does is we provide business to business and account-based marketing, ABM, for healthcare companies selling into healthcare. So primarily technology companies. And when I started the business, I kind of had a much broader offering that I was thinking about. And then when I talked to prospective clients, what they said is, look, the one thing that we really would engage you for is on your expertise in selling into the healthcare market and your business to business knowledge. So focus on that. Don't do the other things. So I kind of scaled back. And I had an initial thing, which is, well, why would I focus on such a narrow niche? And then I thought about it and thought, if you walk around the HIMSS trade show, the big annual HIMSS Global Conference, you see so many different vendors, like thousands, this is well over 1,000 vendors. And that's not even the full market. And I thought, if I got 1% of this market, I'd have a very successful business. So I said, I'm going to place a bet on health tech. And that's what I've done. And by doing that, it's enabled me to leverage what I learned for the last decade with my health tech startup, but then also leverage what I did beforehand. And I kind of, there's always a particular passion which drives what I'm doing. And my recent passion is about account-based marketing. And account-based marketing is something which I wasn't, frankly, although I've been in marketing for a long time, I wasn't that familiar with. And it's an idea that's been around for about 10, 15 years. And I thought, I wish I'd had that, was doing it when I had my business. But I actually realized that early on, we were doing account-based marketing and we were successful with it. When we did the merger, I stopped focusing on marketing, and because I had a lot of operational issues to deal with that were very distracting. And the other members of the team wanted to focus on most CEO-led marketing, which basically meant we would spend a lot of money on very expensive events and associations, which would make CEO to CEO connections. Well, the problem is that the CEO had no real impact on buying our solutions. They might make an introduction, but after that, it was like, it's down to you. And so it's like, it wasn't a scalable model. It was very expensive and it was completely ineffective for us. And so, that was very frustrating to me. And so the more I learned about account-based marketing, the more I realized that there's a real opportunity here, and that there's not many companies do it well in healthcare, and there's a desire to do it. So I'll just explain what the principles are of account-based marketing. So it's particularly relevant if you're selling something which involves a complex sale that has long sales cycles, lots of people involved in the buying process, what's called a buyer collective. And it's a high ticket item. So if it's below $50,000 and it's a shorter sales cycle than 90 days, ABM is not for you. But if you're selling like a complex solution, and that most of them, frankly, are in healthcare, ABM is I think the way to go. And the way it starts is you select the accounts that you want to focus on. So it's not casting a net, it's spear fishing, being really precise. And that means that, there are 6,000 hospitals, probably 1,500 healthcare organizations. So you're not marketing to all of them. You might market to, let's say, 150 of them. And then it's developing a very clear strategy that's based on how those companies buy. And there are some cool tools that you can use, which are related to ABM. One of them is called intent data. So intent data is almost like magic. I tell you if a company happens to be in market for what you do. So let's say you're selling a patient engagement solution. You can see which healthcare systems have the highest interest in patient engagement, or some of the more nuanced things like patient communications. And you can then say, okay, I'm not going to market to the 1,500 healthcare systems. I'm only going to market to the 100 that seem to be really in market, really interested in that particular topic. And you develop campaigns around getting specifically to them. And so, Health Launchpad is essentially, the ABM agency for healthcare. I've got so interested in it, so passionate about it, that I wrote a book on it. The reason I wrote a book on it is I felt, I kind of learned by doing, and I felt that we're learning a lot by doing the work, but I felt like if I wrote the book, I would, solidify and cement the process that we do. So the book is called Total Customer Growth. This is actually the proof copy of it. It's essentially, it's like, if you're thinking about account-based marketing, it's a how-to. So it goes through how you actually set yourself up, how you develop what's called buyer journeys, which help you kind of think about the way that companies buy, what technologies you can use. There are some very expensive ABM platforms out there, but there's some lower cost ways of doing it. And then how to actually turn your organization into an ABM driven organization. One of the nuances, though, is, and then we go into a total customer growth, is it's just as much about how you grow your existing customers as how you acquire new customers. And that was something that, as I mentioned, it's sort of like we spent the first half of our startup focused on new customers, and the second half of our startup keeping and growing what we had. And we were very successful. I think particularly successful actually with the latter. And so, I'm excited with what we're doing, and we've launched a website called totalcustomergrowth.com, which is about the book. And then the other website for the core business is healthlaunchpad.com. And we do, we'll do account-based marketing as a service for customers, for our clients. And so, 3 years in the business, we've just signed our 27th deal. with more, and the deals are, the relationships are getting bigger, and we're working with bigger and bigger companies. In addition to doing consulting and agency services, we also do training and coaching. So we do that as well. And it's exciting. I'm having more fun, frankly, with this startup than any of the other ones. So far, touch wood, there's fewer headaches than I had with the software startup.
Yeah, and definitely myself can relate in the sense of when you have that teaching moment and seeing people flourish, it get you even more excited about what we're doing. And it's not just when we're building our own company, there's a lot of struggles. Yes, you can bounce off with your co-founders, with other board teams, but it's not the same as now I have this knowledge. I know what to do. I can share with other people. And then seeing other people being successful and make you feel the impact is grown so much bigger. And so I definitely a very exciting moment for you guys. And for sure, for people who are truly connected with a larger organization with these higher ticket items, I think the confusion for many people is, oh, well, we can go for the smaller organization and we can also go for a hospital. And then they feel like they're doing everything at the same time. So they really are stretching themselves thin. They don't have enough resource, right? To do both. They really should pick one channel that's the best, because then the client journey, the success path, it's different from a smaller organization versus this big one. And if you have to create 2 client paths, then you need 2 leads for each of the client paths. And it's just so much to manage when people are building.
They're also, fundamentally different sales and marketing strategies. So for smaller, for smaller, if you're selling to smaller practices, something like product-led growth, which is very much like acquisition-driven, using sort of low cost per acquisition, almost, you're using, Google, you're using Facebook ads, that kind of thing to acquire customers at the lowest possible cost. You put, minimum friction, you make it so that people can self-serve. That's one business model. The other business model is the complex sale, which involves salespeople and involves, it's really hard. As a startup, you can't do both. You've got to pick one. The challenge is that, with the first model, the smaller model, you get lower revenue per customer. So you're very much driven by customer acquisition. With the ABM model, you get much bigger revenue per customer, but it takes a long time to get to revenue. And so you better have the wherewithal to outlast those sales cycles, because they will kill you. That certainly was our biggest challenge, was that sales cycles were forever. And one of the things our board kept hammering at us is like, well, can't you speed it up? And it's like, the answer was no, actually you can't. And they would never accept that answer. But that was the reality. It's like, you can't do much. You can do, you can tweak things a bit, maybe shorten it by 10%, maybe 15%, but you're never going to cut it in half.
Exactly. It's because, as you're emphasizing, you have to meet people where their interests are. So if you are spreading too big a net, you actually don't know what their primary interest is. And then once you localize that primary interest, they're already gung-ho about it. And then you can create that alignment with them to say, how do I now serve you? And let's have the conversation with your internal team. And those conversations does take time for people to schedule meeting, right? Waiting for their whole board of people, and even understanding who's actually in charge, or you just talking from the front person and eventually getting to some right people, right? Yeah, it does take time. And sometimes from the entrepreneurial side is we always feel like it needed to be like snap your finger and then we should be getting somewhere already, right? Like tomorrow should be a new day. It doesn't
work like that, especially not in healthcare.
Right, exactly. And then also for all of the really thinkers, the leaders have to retrain your brain to say, it's not just be patient, but it's be intentional with your movements and then readjust and knowing those time is meant to be there and those time need to be filled with other intentional productive work and not just feel the anxiety or the disappointment that you had in moving through this process as how it's supposed to be.
Right.
And I'm excited. This is a great conversation. I know we can talk about even much longer. But I know people, especially people in building and reaching out larger organizations will love to talk to you. And how can they find you? Best is go to the total customer versus Launchpad.
Adam, you can go to healthlaunchpad.com, healthlaunchpad.com, or email me at adam@healthlaunchpad.com.
And tell us, I know you're also very specific in what type of startup and company that you work with. So give us a breakdown.
We typically don't work with early stage companies. We used to do that. We just can't afford to, because they they understand we have a lot of need, but we really can't afford to do that. And so, we're working with companies that are doing at least $5 million a year in revenue. So it's there's a kind of a minimum threshold, but check out the website. We're thinking about doing some online training courses, and so there may be some things that if you're early stage that might be available. And there's loads of resources on the website, and you can buy the book, so you can get the book on Amazon.com, and that'll certainly help you.
Exactly. And then Adam also have his own podcast if you like to check out. So
yes, exactly. Yeah. So I've got thank you very much for bringing that up, Sabrina. Yes, I've got a podcast that I do with HIMSS. It's called the Health Tech Marketing Podcast. So you can find it on in any of the podcast apps. And it's called Health Tech Marketing Podcast.
Perfect. Lots of resources. You know where to find us. There's plenty of people. When you find the right people, we can always help you to grow. And now it's also about looking into opportunities as what it is and be decisive for what's to come for you guys. So thank you for being here, for spending the time, and we're looking forward to see you next week. Thank you for tuning in to Provider's Edge podcast. We hope you enjoy our latest episode and found the insights and tips helpful. We'd love to hear your feedback on the show and learn what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. So please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and let us know what you think. Your feedback is essential to help us improve the show and provide you with the content you need to take your healthcare business to the next level. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.